Um, all right, guys, so getting into it. So today's session, called The View from Within, How UDL Transforms Student Experience, is a sequel session, if you will, to Alison and Elena's previous session, titled Building Lifelong Agency, UDL in the K-12 Classroom. So for a few of you who don't know Elaina and Alison, Alison is a K-12 program implementation specialist with NLSchools, working mainly with schools in the Mount Pearl and CBS areas. She has over 20 years of teaching experience, mainly focused in English, social studies, and is a teacher librarian. She has an avid interest in young adult literature with a focus on providing non-trauma-based diverse books to students as choices within their classroom and personal reading. Allison has observed the power of UDL tenets in her curriculum and is hopeful that her ideas will spark conversations and ideas in others. Elaina is a K-12 program implementation specialist with NLSchools as well, supporting schools across the Avalon Peninsula. With over 20 years of experience in education, she has a diverse background that includes classroom teaching from kindergarten right up to grade 12. Additionally, Elaina brings valuable leadership experience to her role, having served as both an assistant principal and a principal. Elaina is passionate about universal design for learning and has been an advocate in the K-12 school system for the last 6 years. So this seminar, we're going to take a step inside the classrooms through the voices of the students themselves, voices that are being honest, that are being reflective, but not always glowing. Grounded in real classroom stories from grade 6 to 12, we're going to explore how UDL comes alive or also falls flat, depending on the culture that we design, the agency that we foster, and the guidance that we provide. So Elaina and Alison, I'm going to hand the floor over to you folks to get started on this. I'm really excited to hear some of their stories, guys, because for those of you who weren't at the previous session, they kept hinting at, come back to the next session, because they were leaving us on a couple of cliffhangers with some of the stories that they were about to share, but they didn't. So again, ladies, thank you so much for joining us again today, and I'm so excited to hear about these stories from you guys.
Oh, Elaina, our plan worked.
Absolutely. It's all good. All right, so let's dig in without further ado. Let me know that you can still see the slideshow. I'm not an avid Canva lover, but here we are. Here we are. All right, so again, just to kind of give a little bit of background, Alice and I did do a session back in March. We shared stories of our own experiences as UDL practitioners. So we do have that in the back of our head that this is a continuation of those stories, but we will do our best to provide us as much context and background into the stories that we will now present the student perspective and our observations and noticings. So please, because we're living it, it's our stories, it's our lived experiences. Sometimes we have blind spots ourselves and biased. So if there's any point that you need to say, hey, Elaina, hold on, back up, take your time, tell me more before this. So just let us know if it's not clear and you need to know a little bit more about the context. So, Alison, did I capture everything there? I think I did, maybe?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Did you want to continue with the land acknowledgement?
Yes. So we're starting with the land acknowledgement. This was made by a member of our programs team. And in it, we share our connections that we have to the land and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. So we appreciate you listening, and we very much appreciate the work that went into this.
All right, so I'm going to play it. Let me know when you can hear it. Just give me a thumbs up.
Sounds good.
Let me know. Okay.
We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded lands of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, Inuit, Métis, and all First Nations peoples of Newfoundland and Labrador, whose connection to this land spans millennia. We honor their cultures, traditions, and the enduring relationship they have had with the land, the sea, and all its resources. Our bond with this land is sacred and strengthened through outdoor experiences. Whether walking trails, kayaking waters, hunting and fishing, or simply enjoying all the natural beauty that calms our spirits and clears our minds. These moments, shared with family in the forests, on the rivers, or at family cabins, ground us and deepen our connection to both our ancestors and the land. We are grateful for the wildlife, the trees, and the vast landscapes that sustain us. Through stories passed down by our elders, we learn the importance of respecting and protecting the land. These teachings remind us of our responsibility to safeguard its resources for the 7 generations to come. We recognize the ongoing impact of colonization and commit to healing, reconciliation, and ensuring the voices and rights of Indigenous peoples are respected. Together, we celebrate this shared home, embracing the gifts of nature and fostering respect for all that it supports.
Okay. All right, Allison, am I back to the main screen again?
You are, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so before we begin, it's always really important for Alice and I to know who is in our space. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to either put it in the chat or feel free to open your mic, whatever you prefer. If you could let us know who you are, the lens you bring to our space today, and the background. So like what you do for a living, where does, I guess, where do you see UDL in your world, and I guess your interest in I guess being in the session.
I'm not going to write mine. I'm just going to say it if that's okay. I'm Denise Ryan.
Hi,
And
Denise.
I'm team lead with the Department of Education, and I support our inclusion program. And we are responsible for our licensed childcare programs. So our daycares and our after-school programs, our family resource, our home family childcare homes. And we talk about UDL on a regular basis with our team members. And of course, our ages may be a little different than what the university life is, but nevertheless, it's UDL and it's for everyone. And we have had the opportunity with our department to provide some devices. So everybody received an iPad with the AAC training, and we're looking at some wobble chairs, and we're talking about headphones. And so I thought this would be anything UDL I'm going to jump on. So thank you for that.
I really love that. So you have our littles, and then we take them in kindergarten, and we take them, and I don't want to say take care of them, but right up to grade 12, and then we have our post-secondary. So it's like the full
That's right.
the full gamut here today. It's great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
And
thank you.
looking at what people have said in the chat, we have Dan, who's there in person, who is a community of practice member. We have Angela, who is an ESL teacher in Hamilton, Ontario. Joan, who is an accessibility advisor at Memorial University. Melissa, who's an ESL teacher in Hamilton. We have Kristen, who I believe is presenting next month and is a former educator now working in a nonprofit. Carol from Ontario as well, an MLL teacher. And then we have Stacy, who is an instructional designer at CITL, Memorial University. Jordan, who we've met, who is a PhD candidate in the Department of Archaeology. Paul, who's a linguistics professor who works with people with communications disabilities. Heather, who's a learning specialist, a UDL lead and inclusive teaching and learning practices for the Department of Education and Early Childhood in New Brunswick. Vicky, who's a former ESL teacher and current coordinator for Bachelor of Education, Primary Elementary, Nunavut Arctic College Partnership. We have Lori, who recently took a job as a program development specialist, student services at EDU. And before that was at O'Donnell. So she actually knows some of the students I'm going to talk about. We have Karen, who's joined us here from Columbia and is a school teacher there. So I don't think I missed any, but it's so good. And like Amy just said, we have so much phenomenal expertise in this space. Okay, now, Elaina, that little bit of that pressure is coming on.
We're good, Alison. We're
We
good.
got
We got this.
So as Elaina said, this does follow our session from last time, but we don't want your attendance there or your memory of that session to be a barrier. I know that my memory is not what it was. And even if you were there and participating in the chat, it doesn't mean that you're coming back with memories of it all. But basically, as teachers, we each independently found UDL and we applied those learnings to our classrooms. We found ways to make it part of what we do in the classroom. And so this session grows from that and applies our learnings presented last time to the session today. So we're going to look at perspective and change the perspective in some ways from our learning and theory to how it impacted our students, their responses, and what they taught us from how they interacted. We're going to talk about some of the barriers and challenges we faced because it's not just, super easy to go, hey, I'm going to change everything and everyone knows exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to focus on the application and the practical use of UDL in the classroom and how that presented itself with our students. So that's our goal. But like Elaina said, in case at some point we assume some prior knowledge for some reason, please, raise your hand and say, hey, like, back it all up. What is it what led to this? What step am I missing in my understanding here? And that's, we would rather learn that way than, have you walk away and go, well, I would have gotten so much more out of it if I'd asked that question.
Thanks for that, Alison. And creating a safe space for all of us here today is really important to Alison and I. And I know, coming in virtually, not knowing everybody, that's sometimes hard, but take it from us with everything in us right now. Like, we're genuine and we really want this to be a safe space where we're open to ideas, we're open to new learning. And if there is a point where I have no idea what's going on right now, please feel free to say, hang on, tell me that again. Okay, so with all that being said, to give a little bit of context of what we will share, and for the, for the information for everybody in our spaces, we just wanted to highlight the way our K-12 system in Newfoundland Labrador are organized in terms of courses, requirements, and expectations for students. So every course a student takes has content that us as teachers are required to cover and teach. We need to cover that and assess the specific indicators for every course at every level. Okay, so there's no options to not cover, there's no options to not assess. Courses students take are determined by government requirements for graduation. So from kindergarten to grade 9, all students must take a series of courses. There's no options. It is what it is. Their schedule is set, and that's what they have to do. When they get to grade 10, 11, and 12, we go on a credit system. So every course is worth a certain amount of credits, and then there's different categories. So students do have some choice as to what courses they do, but it's still, they have to work within a certain required amount of credits. The amount of time that teachers have to spend on that particular curriculum is also determined by government. So for example, in grade 7, 8, 9, English language arts is 24 hours in a 14-day cycle. We use 14 days for those who are, through CDLI, which is the Center of Distance Learning and Education. Some schools have different cycles. I'm telling you that because senior high would only have 10. So I think it's 10. So there's significant differences in terms of the time and intensity that we have to work within courses. And I think that's right. I'm not sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong with that. So the point is, there's a lot of pieces here that are completely out of teacher control. and then out of the control of our students. And there's a reason we're telling you this.
So grades 3 and 6 have provincial evaluations in either math or reading. So those are ones that are administered at the school level and then are corrected by a marking board or I'll say corrected. I know there's a different term used for the marking board people. In junior and senior high level, some courses have planned and provided exams in a level 3 course. Other courses have school-made exams. So in junior high, they start out by doing a math exam in grade 7. And what needs to be on that exam is actually sent out by some of our colleagues. Then in grade 8, they have math and science. Grade 9, they have math, science, and English. And then in high school, they'll add social studies and Francais to that as well. And they are all worth a certain amount within the course and have to cover certain areas of the course.
Right. So yeah, so our us with program implementation, along with our friends from the department that develop the programs, we develop what they call a table of specifications. So that includes basically what teachers must include on their mid-year and their final exam for courses. All right. All right, so question. With that information in mind, and I know it's probably a lot, and if you're unfamiliar with the education system in Newfoundland Labrador, it might be a little bit tangly and messy right now, but just thinking about what we just shared, where do you think issues would appear in trying to implement UDL in the classroom, in the K-12 classroom? So give you a few minutes to think about that.
And
So
please feel free to share your answers in the chat, or if you want to unmute and share, that's also amazing.
So thinking about the course structure, the course design, the exams, provincial assessments, where do you think issues would appear? So Kristen said pacing of topics and material for students who need longer to learn. Rigid standardized provincial assessments from Heather. Exams don't match the way students learn. Oh, I love it. Maybe flexible evaluation approaches, multiple means of action and expression. Construct relevance to learning goals and instruction and assessment. Focus on product, not process of learning, mainly senior high. For sure.
Definitely.
Administration priorities. Absolutely. Assuming uniform paths to completion. All of the above. Keeners. I love it.
Yep. Okay, so I was a high school English teacher until last December. December 2024. And so from that, I tried to bring UDL into my classes. I tried setting goals, I tried giving choices, all of that, but I did run into some barriers, but I also ran into some beautiful moments. So I'm going to go through my story, but talk more about what the students were saying throughout and get into a couple specific scenarios and stories of students and just how the way that they learned about their learning really just, blew me away. So to get specific about English is required for all students. There are versions if you're an EAL student, if you're a Learn student. There are courses that you can do. Every year, K-12 students complete an ELA course. From kindergarten up to grade 12. It's one of the only ones that runs through the whole curriculum. The only option, I guess, you can do general courses when you get to high school, or you can do academic, but otherwise everyone's in the same classes. And so from grade 9 to grade 12, there is a mid-year and a final exam, each worth 10%. So that's, I guess, English in a nutshell. When you look at the junior high curriculum, it builds on previous learnings. It includes further studies in core subject areas like English, and is organized using subject-specific areas. So for English language arts, which is there on the chart, if you just want to click the button there, Elaina.
Oh, click it like again?
Yep.
Oh, ooh, okay.
An arrow appears.
Sorry, Alison.
So the percentage of instructional time in junior high that has to be spent on ELA is 20% of the instructional time. So it's the highest of them all. Everybody has to do it, and everybody has to do it for that amount of time. So then when we move to the high school curriculum, which is the one that I've worked in more, I have taught junior high, but I found myself in high school and stayed in that area. That builds a little differently. Students still have to do ELA, and they have to do 8 credits in it, which means 4 different courses. Yeah, see the arrow there. You can graduate with just second year math, but with English, you have to do 3 core courses. So that would be something like English 1201, 2201, 3201, or 3 general courses. So 1202, 2202, 3202, and then another one. So sometimes courses like world literature or film studies are offered. Sometimes that includes writing or theater arts, but they have to do 8 credits to be able to graduate from high school. So with that, kids are doing English every single year. And next slide, please. For that, every single year, they have, and I'm going to say there is a typo on here, and it is not mine. This is screenshot from the government website. So yeah, but they have these strands through. There's speaking and listening, there's reading and viewing, and there's writing and representing. So from kindergarten through grade 12, in those ELA courses, except for the one more independent one that they pick, they will cover those 6 strands. So they have been working on that their whole school academic life. And next, okay, so in 2020, 2021, and that's what the presentation was about last time, I started to make changes in my courses. In fall term, I had 3 3201. In winter term, I had 2 2201 and 1 1201. So I did a lead learner project, which was a project sponsored by the school board, where I surveyed my students to find out what they wanted. Because you can imagine that when you do speaking, listening, reading and viewing, writing and representing from kindergarten through to high school, teachers will often hear, oh, we've been doing this forever. We always do the same thing in English. So I surveyed them. And I then got them to tell me more about what they wanted from their classes. So when you go to the next slide, I had 79 students out of a possible 92 answer the survey. There were 20 questions about how to organize English language arts, and each one of them kind of covered different facets about English language arts, from like the subject, the pieces that we do, to the way that they are assessed, to should they have time to work on things. Because one of the things within the curriculum, and I have been saying this and saying this and saying this, and I don't know, it's just it was a learning of mine that with English language arts, it's the concepts that we're covering, not the content. So it's just that we happen to often do the same content because it's stuff that we as teachers are comfortable with, or that we have in the school, right? So, you know, no fault of anyone's own, or we really like it and we've been teaching it, and we're just like, you know what, like they need to know this book or this poem and so on. So just talking to the students even about what is it that we cover. So I'll show you some of the charts. With meant not at all, and 5 meant totally and completely. And so biggest indications were like, how much time should they have to work on things? Should they have choices in books? Should they do classics? So when we look at ideas such as I would like to pick more of the works I analyze, you can see that almost everybody was, yeah, yes, I would. I like having choices in what books we study. Again, the majority was like, yeah, I like having those choices. One that made me a little sad is I feel the works we read reflect me as a person, because you can see the majority of those are in the 1, 2, and 3. So 1 being not at all, and then 3 being, well, maybe kind of. So we have students who are in our classes because they have to be, and they don't feel that they're reflected in the works. They didn't like doing classics, right? Shakespeare, Sophocles, Bronte. They would rather do like Lin-Manuel Miranda, Jason Reynolds, Maya Angelou, right? Then we look at the next ones. Some of the other things they said is I like to have choice in my assignments. You can see 43 of them were a 5, 27 was a 4. I think we do the same thing in English every year, almost completely and totally. 58 people said, yeah, we do the same thing in English all the time. Students wanted to be more involved with the grading of their work. And then the one that I hated to share with my colleagues, and I hated to see, was that every year English class is one of my favorites. And again, the majority of them are in the no. And so I had to start thinking about, okay, like, what do I do? How do I change this? And so, as we talked about in the last time, I changed how I offered my curriculum. I updated things and so on. But what would you do? If you were looking at this, all of the government information and the student information, how do you think you would move ahead? Right? Give you a second to put an answer in the chat or on mute to share, or if you're just thinking about it and you don't want to share your early wonderings and thoughts, that's okay too. Oh, Amy. I found I didn't ugly cry so much as I just was like, I have to do something. Yeah, firm goals by flexible means have those wonderful kids involved and engaged. Definitely, Heather.
I want to give a big shout out to Alison too, because how many of us would be willing to be vulnerable to ask these questions to our students? And asking is one thing, but giving them that voice and honoring that voice to start thinking, I need to do something different. And that takes guts and courage. So shout out to Alison to even just start thinking about that process.
And I will say one thing that I had to do, and that I encourage anybody in a role as a teacher to do, is let the ego go. Right? Like, I made it clear to them, they're not critiquing me as a teacher or their former teachers. And they followed that. And that was really nice as well, that they were like, you know what? Like, this isn't about, oh, I hated my teacher in grade 7, and because of that, I fail English every year. Right. So, yeah, I love how everybody's putting in there, giving them agency and giving them choices of books and so on. So, what I did with it, I knew students wanted agency and choice. I still had to cover the curriculum, and there were still other classes happening with other teachers. Right. So there were their peers, their grade peers were in classes with other people. And eventually there were exams to be concerned about, with the same exam being given to students in other classes and eventually in other schools. So I had to consider, how do you honor student voice and agency while still honoring that curriculum? Right. So I changed how I did assessments. I changed it from a genre-based into a thematic base. So this is like an example of the introduction to a unit. And so I had, if you click the little clicks there, I themed each unit so that it said like everything was under a whole umbrella. I still covered and told them what elements would be covered. So in this particular one, dramatic work, poetry, and essays would be talked about. I made it relevant. right? So students would have to look at the impact a decision could have on the lives of those involved. And I tried to ensure that there was choice in the assignments, even if it wasn't all about choice. So they will analyze a piece we studied in an analytical essay format. I had to do an analytical essay. They got to pick the prompt, they got to pick the piece that they did it about. And as well, they had to create a found poem based on the dramatic work around the idea of the dramatic work, right? In which case, in this one, it was Come From Away, right? So I brought in a modern piece for that regard, as opposed to doing Macbeth. And then I also gave them learning goals. So I went through the curriculum and I rewrote it as learning goals. So that way, all of these, each one is a different strand, right? I think it's like speaking, listening, reading, viewing, writing, and representing for each one. So that way, the curriculum was being covered. It was done in plain language, and it was done in a way that they could understand from the beginning what it was that they were going to learn in that unit. So then what I did after that was for each assessment, and I also, because apparently I like to take on too much, I also went to markless grading and went with standards-based, because I was like, why not just do it all? I gave them rubrics. And for each goal, I got them as a class to, or each class basically, to brainstorm what would be represented in that particular goal, and what does it mean? Like, what am I looking for? And they had to mark themselves and give the reason. So I can expand on my ideas in a clear and sensitive manner. Well, these are the points that should be covered. I did have one kid say, but Miss, isn't that like your job? And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, but do you find it's a little better when you understand? He's like, well, yeah, sure, fine. So yeah, so I did all of that to try to make sure that they had that voice, and I still was covering everything, and they still had concrete rules, concrete things that had to be done.
Firm goals.
Firm goals.
Co-constructing success criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it
really,
wasn't, sorry, go ahead.
no, and I was just thinking like empowerment.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were empowering them as a learner to be a part of the learning process.
And it wasn't, oh, you don't like to write an essay? Okay, fine. You can do an interpretive dance for me, right? Like, but it was, okay, here's some choice with this, and how do you think you did and why? So then, as we continued on in the final week of the term, I would discuss their marks with them. And they had to come ready with a sense of where they felt they would be. They looked at the rubrics, they looked at the grade book, they looked at all of that stuff. And I will say most of them proposed a mark lower than I would have given. And they would be like, well, Miss, I really think, an 85 would be good for me because I did this, but you can see I did a little better in later assignments in that area, and so on. I will actually, I think a 90 would actually be better. Would you be okay with that? And they would just kind of stop and go, wait, what? And most of them responded really well to that. And here's where one of the issues did come up, in that with some of them had an understanding of maybe some of the topics, but not necessarily learning and showing their learning. And so they would, I remember one child saying to me, well, someone who loves English as much as me should not get a mark that starts with an 8, because I was proposing an 88 for them. And I said, well, all of your assignments, I've given you feedback, I've given you time to redo it, and you haven't. Your final assignment showed a lot of passion, but it didn't take it was just you ranting as opposed to you showing learning, which didn't actually meet the assignment. And so that became an issue, because for some students, especially those who are very good at the topic, they didn't necessarily understand the process of learning. They understood the process of getting things done and liking a subject. And so that was one of the barriers that I faced with all of this. And I had to kind of think, okay, and I had to do a lot of self-reflection. Is this a me thing? Is this a them thing? And I had to, from that, then adjust how I presented my ideas to students. and explain things so that there would be a further understanding as we went through. So then I changed schools. I got all the kids all comfortable, and then I changed schools. And I changed to a position where I was a department head. So I was supposed to be in charge of the department and leading people into doing what I was doing. I had in talking about this and showing it all, the principal and was impressed with what I was doing and hired me to be department head. And so I had to figure out, how do I now bring this into a completely new place where I'm going from the kids being used to me, even when I was doing things the way I had been doing them before, into a place where I was new to the community and new to the students entirely and the teaching staff. So I had to do work in different ways. And I will admit, it took me a little while to figure that out and how to go with it, but I had to stay true to who I was as a teacher. So, I still continue to do the same types of things. And if you want to switch slides there. Oh, no, it's all good. I still started, and I ended up working a lot with one of the teachers in my department on different assessments that could be given in, I guess, to these students, these newer students. And this is one I learned a lot from. It brought it all home to me that things were working, that students were getting it past the original group of kids that I was working with. So I gave this poetry assignment to my grade 11s, and I set the goal with them. And so we talked about the goal of the assessment. Okay, you're going to choose your own adventure. What you have to do is teach me about a poem of your choosing, or write and show me your understanding of a poem. So it all fit in. Each one of these was a different way that they could give the information. And for them, they have more information, including like specific thing. Everything was kind of carried out. This is just a screenshot of the assessment. And so they had class time to work on it, and they could tell me stuff about it. And I had a couple of groups of kids in there, that one group in particular that were these really quirky, academically strong students. And the one I'm going to speak of, this is great kid. At one, like, very multifaceted. At one point, he played the national anthem on his electric guitar while wearing his hockey uniform for the game he was about to play in, right? Like a kid with all kinds of skills. The next year, he was one of our leads in our musical. So he was this really strong kid, and he was so great to have a conversation with. And so he and his friends all decided, for some reason, they wanted to do using paper, Canva, or Google Slides, create a book of your chosen poem. You need at least 5 slides pages. And so he did this little book on the poem, the Philip Larkin poem, The Hedgehog. And it was crap. It was really bad. And I had an intern at the time, and he looked at it and he's like, what? Like, I said, it's from this kid. Like, we were both kind of okay. And it got a 65. Because I was back to using marks then. New school, and having to kind of go back to that idea. And so the kid got the work back, and he was upset. And he came to me. And he's like, Miss, like, I don't get 65s. What is this? Right? Like, what did I do wrong? And I had to say, well, we talked it through, and he told me about the poem. And I said, like, okay, so here you are with this. And, you've just told me so much about this poem. I get your understanding. I know what you understand here. Like, I understand, like, you've explained it to me in a way that shows that this was the right poem for you to pick and that you have a connection with it. Do you think you showed me in the right format? And he was like, oh, he said, you know what? I should have done the podcast. Like, yeah, that probably, like, for you. And he said, well, my friends were doing the books, and I just decided to do the books. And I said, okay, but like, and we have accessible gear here for you to do it. He goes, yeah, you know what? Next time I have a choice like that, that's how I do things best. And I said, okay, now I'm going to change your mark. And I changed it to an 85, but I did put a note in there, and it said that this note wasn't changed because I reassessed the work and gave it a higher mark. This was changed because we had a conversation and his knowledge was shown. And that really brought it home for me that sometimes kids don't get their strength. They do stuff because this person likes it, or that person likes it, or this friend's doing it, or that friend's doing something.
Or they think
Or,
that particular way is easy.
Or they think it's easy. And sometimes they don't necessarily have the faith in some of their skills that other ways could be easy because they have skills in that way. So that one really brought it home for me. And I guess that was one of the kids that I think left you on spoiler and high alert with that, because that was a real learning moment for me. Yes, the mower. Thank you, Amy. The link is in there. It's this beautiful poem, except for the fact that it's a little dismembery for the hedgehog. But it's the last couple lines. It's a modern sonnet. It's the last couple lines about it at the end are about, we must learn to be kind while there's still time. Right. So, I try to bring that to them. So that was one student who really showed me that a lot of this, you can give all these choices, you can give all these ideas, but you also have to teach these students where their strengths are and help them develop and encourage these strengths. So that was a moment where I was like, okay, right? Like, this is still working. This is still, it's just now a next level that I have to start working on. And then the next story I'm going to tell before I pass this over to Elaina is one that I considered not putting in, but then I told it to Elaina and she was like, yeah, you know what, maybe you should. I had the next year another English 2201 class, and it was a small class. I think the first term I'd had maybe like 35 in my class, and this term was 21. And in that particular grade, and this class had a lot of high needs. I was busier in this class than in almost any other. And this particular student had really high needs. He had physical needs. And because of that, he was incredibly frustrated. His child was in a wheelchair due to muscular dystrophy. And he was frustrated with a lot in life. And all I have been told is he wants to be treated normally. So I did. And he had choices in it. And the big assignment for me that kind of cracked the ice with him was a novel assignment. I would assign a novel of their choice in the beginning of the year, and they would do an independent project. They had silent reading at the start of each class where they had time to read their book. But I would do like a book tasting, and then they would pick and they would get one of their choices. And he didn't submit any choices. And I was like, okay, well, like I did with everybody, I assigned a novel to him that I thought he would like, and he threw it. When he got the paper copy, he said, that's not going to work for me. I said, okay, well, I can direct you to some audiobooks. I don't want an audiobook. I said, okay. Well, what would you read, a PDF or of a book? What do you like? And he finally said, well, I like space. I found him a copy online of An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield. And so he had choice, but he didn't totally use it. I found something I felt would fit. Throughout the course, he was really frustrated because he didn't want to take his accommodations. He didn't want his help, but then he wasn't always doing well. And he was just kind of, doing what he could and then whatever. And I know he would go to one of the other teachers, his world literature teacher, and he would just be like, I hate English. And she'd be like, I don't want to hear it. And so we got to the novel assignment, and he came over and one of the choices they had was to draw a portfolio of pictures about the plot of the novel. And he came over and he had two kind of done. Excellent artist. And he said, I don't know what else to do. I said, okay, well, did you finish your book? He said, well, no. Like, okay, well, that would make it harder. And I said, well, why did you pick this if you're not sure what to do? I mean, you have 2 of 5 done. He said, well, I thought it'd be easy. Like, okay, well, is it? And he was just annoyed. And so the next day I went up to him and I said, hey, like, I hear in world literature you're doing the graphic novel Mouse. Is that something maybe you'd like to cover instead of the novel I gave you? And he went, no. I went, okay. I said, because I know, like, it was not a requirement for me to know the book. Again, English is concepts, not content. But I know Mouse quite well. I've done multiple courses in Holocaust studies. I've led human rights and Holocaust program and so on. So I just let it sit and it's like, okay, well, I can mark what you have done, whatever. And he came up to me a few days later. He said, Miss, can I do that graphic novel from World Lit? I was like, yes, of course you can. Like, excellent. And the work he did was extraordinary. This kid, his art was phenomenal. His detailing of the plot of Mouse was his own style, yet it still reflected Mouse, which is a graphic novel. And from that moment, I think when he realized I wasn't putting roadblocks in his way by not giving him the answer, but instead letting him determine it. But when he realized that, like, this is actually trying to help me, he opened up, and the rest of the year with him was actually quite wonderful. He still got lippy with me. I got lippy back, but I did that with a lot of students. So, we had a thing going on. And he had a friend who would just remind him, hey, if you started that, you'd be done now. So let's get to it. And when he finished the course and he had his interview with me and he showed me his portfolio at the end of, we had them do a museum of me where they had to show things about themselves and things that they liked. And just the smile on his face, talking about some of the things that he loved in his life. And talking about, he showed like barbecuing with his dad, and we started talking about types of steaks and all of that. Like, it was beautiful, but he needed to understand, and I needed to know that my not giving him, here's the way you do things, was not trying to keep him from something. That wasn't a barrier I was trying to put there. And so that moment for me at that end of that course, and sadly, like, the student had a different teacher the next year, and sadly he passed away the summer after high school. And I'm still like, I think back on that smile when he talks about the steaks he barbecued with his dad and the side-by-side motorcycle that they built. And I think, my goodness, this kid, at least I gave him a moment where he had that control over his curriculum and he was able to learn and grow. And he gave me that moment as well, where I was able to learn and grow. So yeah, so many different stories from so many students, and I feel like I've taken half of Elaina's time in talking about it all. So I will move on to the next slide here and just say that, students reacted so well, and we can just flick through those quotes. They're all in the slideshow, which has been shared. But giving books to students their own choices. Some of them said this first book they've read since junior high, right? Like, giving them that time to do things and do it about themselves. They decided they could do it. They had a noticeable difference when they realized I was actually listening. This wasn't lip service. I was listening to them and their peers. And so, I guess just to summarize everything, at the end here, students need to know who they are as learners. And we as teachers need to not necessarily get in the way, right? They need to be engaged in their interests and futures and not just my interests. And we need to not have a selfie pedagogy, which is not student-centered, but instead is about what we think is good for them. And those two graphics there are things that guide me as I plan for courses and plan when I work with students. So that's my story and the story of some of my students. If you ever have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. And now it's Elaina's turn.
Are we going to do this question, Allison, or do you think?
It's 3 o'clock, so we should
Okay.
probably move to your stuff
Okay.
and your wonderful stories.
Thank you so much. Do we need a pause for a second? Let's just have a little pause for a minute to kind of, because now we're going to transition into, I guess, into my piece. So let's just take a 30 second pause to just kind of gather our thinking. And there will be some time at the end if anybody would like to ask Alison some questions, and unless there's something pressing right now that you need to ask, feel free. We still have lots of time. The awkward silence. Okay, I'm not really good with wait time. Let's get into it. Okay.
She's learning. She's much better than she was.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, so my story, I guess my piece to this session is a little bit different than Allison's. I'm going to share really 4 different stories, all from the perspective of the students that I had, both as teachers, students, and learners. So the views I am going to present today is from a practicing classroom teacher, so that would be me. As a teaching principal a few years ago, I was able to get my own grade 6 math class, and basically did UDL, tried to figure it all out, made lots of mistakes. So I'm going to share my story, but really get into the perspectives of students because I learned from them. Then I'm going to switch gears and share a few stories as my view as a program specialist working with new teachers and their beginning learning around UDL. And I was fortunate enough to get some student videos of the impact of teachers shifting their practice towards more of the UDL mindset. And then my favorite of all, without giving it away too much, I was very fortunate to meet a teacher who had taken on his own learning around UDL, and I actually interviewed one of his students. She's a grade 12 student that spoke so eloquently about her understanding of UDL. So I have a video of her as well. So less of me talking, more is like a show and tell today. Okay, so let's dig in. So grade 6 math. So last time I shared my story around this. So kind of back it up a little bit. Classroom teacher for 12, 13 years, dove into the world of administration. Then I was able to get into a K-6 program specialist position. All around the same time, a new policy called responsive teaching and learning was first developed and implemented. And responsive teaching and learning kind of took a different lens to providing supports in classrooms for K-6 students. And if we are well versed in the MTSS that our friends in the United States follow, it's like that. So basically have a strong universal tier and identify students that need that little bit extra support, targeted or tier 2 supports, and then tier 3 supports. So I was basically tasked with helping schools understand that. Fast forward 2 years, I took a leave of absence from that program specialist job into a principal role where I was also a teaching principal, and I found myself teaching grade 6 math. So after preaching UDL for 2 years without really understanding it well myself, I basically had to put my money where my mouth was. And so I took on grade 6 math and started to think about how does this look in the classroom. So this was, I think it was 2020-2021 school year where we began in the classroom and then another round of COVID hit, which landed us back online virtually for about a month, and then we were able to come back in person. So when I first began planning through the lens of UDL, designing through the lens of UDL, I solely focused on curriculum outcomes. I was completely focused on providing options for students to show me what they know, by just basically giving choice in questions, choice in manipulatives, choice in how they were learning it. That was going okay virtually because I started doing this while we were online. Then kind of got some rhythm going, and then we landed back in the classroom again. So once we got face to face in person, that I continued doing what I was doing, providing choice in terms of questions, providing choice in terms of like what you want, what do you want to do to help you learn it. But it wasn't going so well because it was basically, without going too far into it, the self-regulation and like executive functioning skills, all the things were really I don't know, out the window or something. My class was chaos. They were dependent on me. They were not getting, what they needed. They were talking, there was behavioral issues, all the things. So from there, I shifted. I realized, oh my goodness, like there's something missing here. And I realized that it was around the engagement principle, around self-regulation. And basically, I moved from designing learning based just solely on curriculum to actually giving them power and autonomy and choice over how they learned, but also how they showed me they learned and in what way they did that. So here are two pictures of my students first when they came back. Note the masks. It gives me like, ugh. So they're all sitting at a table together, with their folders, with a whole lot of paper, the same type of material, same type of manipulatives. And you can see the student there sat down with his hood up, kind of completely disengaged. And that's kind of how it went. And I'm thinking, like, I need to change this. Something's going on. So what I did is I shifted from everybody having to do the same folder of work to, okay, talk to me about what's going on. What do you need? How can we manage this a little bit differently? So it came out, and like to Alison's point, asking them what is happening. What do they need as learners? How can this class get better? And they're very keen to tell me what they needed. They were bored, that some of the questions were hard. They didn't understand some things. That's when the behavior started, all the things. So getting their voice and getting their opinion as to like how to make this work. Some students liked working alone. Some students wanted to work outside the classroom. Some students really liked writing on the board and just having like that big space to write and to really get at their thinking. Some students needed a thinking partner, another colleague or friend, to talk through some of the ideas. So I was teaching long enough to know that if I'm going to give them a little bit of autonomy, we need expectations, and I need to teach them explicitly what my expectations are for them. If they are working outside the classroom, here's what they need to do. So again, like I think about those firm goals, right? So they need it. So once we practiced what working with a friend looked like, once we practice what it meant to, when you are outside the classroom, this is a privilege, this is what I'm expecting, then things really started going. So these pictures here basically represent the different things that, how my classroom looked on a given day. Some students, talking up, moving, they need movement. The big long pieces of paper, they chose how they wanted to work through their thinking. They chose whether or not they wanted to work by themselves or work with somebody else. And again, all of that came about by asking them what they needed. But then also the biggest piece is giving them time at the end of class to reflect on what choices they made for that class and how that affected them and impact their learning. So I bet the two of these are going to start at the same time. Okay, so I've got I've got two videos here. So Carson, I shared this one the last day, but it's equally pertinent to today. So this is a kid, he loves to talk. He loves to talk, he loves hockey, all the things. And in math class, he would get himself in trouble because he would talk and he was energetic and all the things. So this is basically a day where he chose to work with his friends. It didn't go so well. I had a conversation with him. You know, what do you think he needs to do the next day? And he chose to work by himself. So this is him reflecting on that choice and whether or not that was a good choice for him. Let me know if you can hear it, okay? I'm going to back it up. Now it won't play. I hate technology right now. All right, so Carson, you decided this morning to work alone and you did your work on paper. Can you hear it? So was that a good choice for you this morning?
Yeah, because like I find when I work with other people, I get caught up in like all the going around and I don't really do my work the best I can. But when I sat down and actually thought about it, I found that I could do it a lot easier instead of working with partners and them fighting over what's right and what's wrong. So once I sat down, I just thought and knew it,
And how do you feel about the work that you did this morning?
I feel good. I thought I did really good.
Awesome. Good stuff. Okay, were you able to hear that okay? Yes? Okay. So again, that came from me pausing and understanding the importance of giving kids time to think about the choices they made and whether or not that worked. And Alison spoke to that too. It's so cool how the stories are kind of the same, because giving choices, that's a little tiny small part of this. It's helping students to understand the choices they make and the right choices that they need to make depending on the situation and the context based on their learning preferences at the time. So the next video is about Peyton and Jackson, and they always chose to work outside the classroom in a spare room across the hall with this big, huge whiteboard. And prior to this, Peyton's confidence in math, she did not see herself as somebody with a math mindset, I guess, or somebody that could do math. Math was hard for her. This was a game changer for her. And what I realized for Peyton, she just needed somebody to talk through her thinking with. She needed to take risks. She needed to play with math and play with some of her ideas. So this is her and Jackson now. I will say the volume on this gets loud really quick because I start talking and I'm really close to the camera. So just to let you know. I want to ask, off the cuff, hi Jackson, you guys worked out all your workings on the board and you talked through it in a group.
Yeah.
Do you find that easier or harder than on the paper?
Easier on the board.
Why?
Because it's easier to erase your work
Okay.
and you can like write. You got more space. You
got
more space instead of having more and more sheets of paper.
So if I told you you had to do that on paper this morning all by yourself at your desk.
Yeah, no thanks. I would have found it really hard.
Why?
Because I wouldn't like. Two lines helps a little bit better. Being with someone also helps me too. Like I could do it for myself.
Why?
Cause I don't know. I just find that when you're doing it on the whiteboard, that it's like not that it has more space. It's just that you can like I don't know the word to put behind it.
Okay. So I love that video. All right, so that's that piece. And, I'm going to use Allison's words, like that was it for me. I knew that we were onto something, and, it was definitely worth all the messiness and the hard work. So what I observed from the students from my experience with that is that they went from being dependent to independent. They, once they started feeling confident because barriers were removed in their learning. They knew that it was okay to make mistakes, that they went from being compliant to, like, basically just filling out the sheets, going through the motions, to being a risk taker. And then they literally went from having a fixed mindset about math and about them as learners to a growth mindset. And this was a quote by one of the students, actually was Peyton, who you just saw. Miss our learning goal. We achieved it. We did it. We really can do math. So to me, that's so powerful. Like, we can do this. So again, that was for me that was worth everything, all of, like, the angst and the hours, and just like, holy cow, like, what am I doing? Am I doing this justice? All the things. So I'm just looking at the time. Oh my goodness. All right. So we don't want to present this today to make you all think that everything went wonderful and everything was great, because for myself and Alison, having many conversations, we made a lot of mistakes. And I'm just going to try and capture this story as quickly as I can, because I really want to get to the other two pieces. Failure really does give you opportunities to grow. After that year of being principal and grade 6 math teacher, I went back into my program specialist role. I was supporting a teacher who was teaching math in grade 7. Math in grade 7, includes a lot of new topics, a lot of new learning, and test assignments, quizzes, a lot of paper pencil assessments, just because of the way the reporting period, like the reporting is. You need percentages at the end of the year. So this teacher connected with me and basically share with me she was struggling because she had a lot of diverse learners in her classroom. And she was noticing that 2 or 3 of her learners, they were not able to really produce paper pencil assessments in a way that accurately assessed their learning in math. So me just coming out of the classroom with all the success that I felt that I had with UDL, I said, oh, this is easy. I know exactly what you need to do. So I told her, I said, okay, get some interest inventories on the go, see what their preferences are, what do they like. I mapped out a unit plan for her on fractions. That's what she was doing. I set the learning goals, the success criteria. I gave her a bunch of different choices and different options for her to share with her students, and videos on to do this, and do a poster for that, do a video for that. Hey, her and I felt great about it. This is going to work perfect. We got it. The assessment came, the end of unit assessment came. She gave her students choices as we mapped out. One of the choices was a video, because that was based on the interest surveys. There's 2 of the kids that she really struggled with, said that they really like YouTube, they really like video creation, all the things. I said, perfect, let's get them to create a video to share what they have learned throughout the unit. Didn't go so well. Complete failure, the whole thing. What we figured out and what we learned, first of all, I did the work with it. She was not a part of that planning. I had it in my head. I did not do a good job with helping her to understand. I was looking at the point that giving choices is the answer, giving choices for what type of an assessment that you want to do, or for the kids to do. What happened, I went back into her classroom after and realized, I started talking to the kids like, how come you didn't want to do a video for that? And what they said to me shook my world, but it made me realize that choices are not choices if students don't know how to use them. Because what they told me, well, I didn't want to choose a video because I really did not know how to show that I know how to do that using a video. Like, how do you even use a video to do math? And that was like a huge aha moment for me. And again, I go back to, like, you know, what Alison said about given choices, that we need to teach kids how to use that as you're learning through that in order for them to give it, you know, for it to be a choice. So that was a huge piece for me. I felt so terrible, but when you know better, you do better. So my next story really comes from that learning, because I then began working with a new teacher who was teaching grade 6 and grade 7 together in a multi-grade classroom. The grade 6s, for grade 6, the assessment for grade 6 is basically a rating scale for the report card. Grade 7 again is percentage based. She was really struggling with how to do that in the same classroom at the same time with two different concepts. And it was really cool because her grade 7s were my grade 6s from the previous year. So this was the school that I was principal in. So she really wanted to get some guidance around assessment. So I think, you know what, like, let's work together. Let's figure this out. So we focused on the action and expression principle. I introduced her to UDL, and we sat and planned the unit together. And then I was there to support her off and on, not every day, but every week we check in, and we had a continuous conversation happening all the time. So again, her focus was on assessments. Her focus was on assessing student learning formatively and summatively. So she was really interested in how to do that differently other than paper pencil. So here's a video of this. Oh, I'm trying to pause it. Here's a video that we created. So she implemented the unit and implemented the different assessment strategies. So then we created a video to kind of show evidence of impact of what she did. And again, getting that student voice.
I like a whiteboard because it's not sitting down and doing work on papers. It's being up and able to talk to people about how you feel about the question. I like interviews because they're not as overwhelming as tests, and the teacher can tell you what you have to work on. What's this?
Yeah, why?
Gives you more when you put down your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It also, like, it's a way easier way to learn, and it's a lot more fun. It's really fun.
Yeah. Anything else?
And you can also restart anything you want.
Yeah. Love it.
I enjoy doing wordable questions when we spend time with our friends.
I enjoy interviews because it's not as stressful as a test, and we play math games with class in our free time.
It's actually something you can use more often. I love math because it's fun and we're math friends.
My favorite math class is when we do the whiteboard questions because it helps us learn to interact with other people. And if we don't know something, we can ask a friend, or we can help them too, and we can figure out our questions. That's easier.
All right. I'm sure you probably recognized a few of the students in that video compared to the other two. So it was really fun to kind of watch their progression and to make sure that I didn't screw up them in grade 6 math. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Okay, so the takeaway. So this came from their teacher, because I basically I interviewed her after the whole process, and we reflected together about the differences and what the takeaways were. So obviously, student engagement increased, student achievement increased. She felt, in her words, she had more valid assessments and evaluations of student learning. She incorporated peer feedback as well as teacher feedback, which increased every day. Every day she was assessing. Every day she was giving feedback because of the differences in the ways that she had set up designed her class. Mathematical processes were optimized, something that she noticed that it was kind of lacking in her classroom, and learning was more accessible to all because for her as the teacher, it was easier for her to be responsive. And Alison, who was my student, saw this shift, and then she began her own UDL journey. And I have a link there to a video that captured the different things she did, and I narrated the video to connect it to the UDL guidelines 2.0. So it's a little bit outdated because I did do it a few years ago. If you want to check that out, that's there. Okay, my favorite part, and I'm looking at the time, we're going to go over, but it's going to be worth it, I promise. Okay, so through my UDL journey, one of the last, I don't know, a couple of years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, I met a teacher, Robert Golding, his name is, he's now retired. He's from Botwood Collegiate, and he spoke highly of, himself as being a UDL practitioner. So he shared his passion for UDL with me. I don't even know how we connected or how we met. Anyway, long story short, I was able to interview him. I had a full day with him virtually, picking his brain, just asking him all the things, just trying to really get UDL going in our province, in the district. So while I was interviewing him, he was talking about his classes, and he was like, would you be interested in interviewing one of my students? And I'm like, hell yeah. So took upon that opportunity. So it was completely like out of the blue. Nothing was prepared, like nothing was staged, like it was just pure, like one-on-one, honest conversation with one of his students, Claire Fast. So Robert was a lead learner in this school who learned about UDL through a PL session, and then he tried it. He just started. He dug in and he started, and it caught on so much so that other teachers in his building kind of became interested, and then they really became a PLC together, and they learned about UDL together. And so what you're going to see is Claire's going to talk about several of her teachers employing UDL practices, and she explains the different ways that each of them do that. So I know, like, we're running out. I can't wait for you to see this. It's 9 minutes.
I'm Claire Fass. I go to school in Botwood Collegiate. I'm currently a grade 12 student. Yeah, so I feel that our school has great school spirit and a great school community. Our leadership team does a lot of activities like dances and pep rallies and everything like that. And we find it really builds a good relationship between everybody in the school, including staff and students. With regards to the classroom, there are a lot of good things happening. Teachers are finding new ways to demonstrate learning and to get feedback from students to incorporate into their teaching style and everything like that. So I find this going really good, and I think it's starting to change for the better. When I came to grade 7, everything was done on paper, right? It was just like the old school style, I'll call it. Like, you write your tests on paper, you do your assignments on paper. You might do a presentation here or there on computer, but like that was like once in a lifetime kind of thing. So since that, I found COVID has changed that a lot because we had to move to virtually, of course. So now we started doing assignments online, like more slideshows, more documents, more videos even. And I found that's helped me a lot, and my classmates find it a lot better, because growing up in the world that we're in, we're exposed to technology all the time. So using it in the classroom and for our assignments and schoolwork has helped a lot, so that we don't have to, we do stuff that we're more used to, the way I think about it. So I've heard my teachers kind of mention it in class before, and when I heard the definition, it's like, oh, okay, so that's what they're trying to do. So universal design for learning for me is just like trying to accommodate the needs of everybody in the school and making sure that they can all learn and all get where they need to be. And of course, that can look different for everybody. Really trying to incorporate all the different aspects of how somebody can learn into the classroom as best as you can. Phys ed, what my teacher started doing is like, he sets up different activities so that everyone can try and participate in physical activity. Because if you're doing one activity, like say if you went and did volleyball one day, not everyone's going to want to play volleyball. So not everyone's going to be engaged. But if you're opening up different activities, like, okay, you have basketball down here, maybe you have a badminton net here, or even something simple like square ball down the other side, then you can engage everybody and let them all get an activity, right? Like math is a little bit trickier to, because most people who are good at math, just like straightforward, right? Okay, you have to do this, then this. Harder to accommodate in that subject. But what I found that my teacher's done that helps me is my math teacher records his classes. So then when I might not understand something in class and I can go back and watch it later and break it down myself, I can see it and I can listen to it over and over again. It's on his laptop and like screen records so that you can hear his mic. And while we're still sitting in class, like we still have the personal in-person thing, he still posts everything that he does online. I find that really helps, especially for people who might not be accustomed to learning like that, you know, at a fast pace.
There you go, Alison.
So my English teacher, I found, also does a lot of that. Like if we're given an assignment, we're given multiple ways to go about that assignment. I had to say we had to respond to a question, like from a novel study or something. You can write it. You can do a video on it with like you speaking or you not in the camera, like anything like that. You can make a poster on it, and you can even like have an interview about it. So I found that's a great way, because, you know, sometimes I might like to talk to somebody about something. Other times I might not feel as confident, and I might like to like write it down and make sure I have everything there. Sometimes I might like to respond in a video, because I like to put videos together. Like I like to record and then get my friends to get in it as well, that kind of thing. And I found one project that I really enjoyed last year was we did a documentary on our school. So like we all took like a different aspect of the school, and then all the groups came together and made one big video. So then you had people who were good at writing, preparing the writing part. People who were good at speaking, doing the speaking part. People who were good at like editing and the technology part of it did the editing and everything like that. So we all had a part to contribute to one big project. For me personally, I love to do like all different kinds of learning. Like I'm that kind of person who doesn't need one specific thing. So if I'm feeling one day like I want to write, then I have the option to write. If I feel like, you know, maybe I like to try something different and not just do like just the essay writing, like again, like straightforward, then I have that option and I can explore it's like a little bit more creative in my opinion. So then you got that aspect as well for the people who just don't want to be logically doing it in a pattern. I find for my classmates, it's made a big difference as well, because a lot of people in my school can't learn on the board. Like they can't process anything when the teacher's just up there teaching and we have to take notes. They can't focus to listen to the teacher, write down notes, and understand the material. So what I find is good is that, of course, there's the recordings, and then they have the option to sit down and talk to the teacher, and the teacher will walk them through it and be like, okay, what do you need to go over, kind of thing. And then on the assignments, like we're allowed collaboration. We're allowed to talk to each other. So then we get to basically teach each other. Like if I'm good at one thing, someone's good at another thing, we can work on it together, that kind of thing. And I really enjoy that. I found that's made a big difference in our school in general over the last couple of years.
All right, so the next part of the video, she talks about the assessment practices, which really talks about standards-based learning. But the other, I'm not really going to get into that. I'm going to like kind of looking at the time, and I know we're over, and I want to thank you so much for, staying with us. At the end of the video, Claire actually gives advice to teachers who are basically, thinking about trying something different, thinking about trying UDL, diving in, and basically she says, you know what, like it's worth it, it's worth trouble, just dive in, try it. And the biggest piece she kind of says is listen to your students. Let us have a voice. We know ourselves best. We know what we need. Please ask us for our voice, and we can help you figure things out from there. So, like, it's so powerful. So again, the link to that video is in the slideshow. You can certainly watch it in its entirety if you wish. But I just thought it was a really good way to kind of end our session, end our little two-part series. Because I think like that's the biggest takeaway for me, and I think for Alison's story too, is when we think about the ultimate goal of UDL, and it's around learner agency, is letting our students have that voice, but also helping them find that voice and giving them time and opportunities to find who they are as a learner, and then give them the choice and give them the opportunities to be able to make decisions for themselves so that, they can test out, is this really going to work for me or not? And if not, that's okay. So thanks everybody for that. And we won't get to that. Thank you so much for joining our session. If you have any questions, we can stick around. If not, I think you have our email, or you can just find us at nlschools.ca.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's really appreciated.